What's up, everyone? Welcome back to Ball2Books Spotlight. My name is Drew Heath. I'm one of the co-founders of Ball2Books and your host for today. As always with Ball2Books Spotlight, we're talking to people who play sports at a high level, whether it be in college or professionally, and now have transitioned onto a new phase of life. Today, we're talking to someone, once again, that I have the pleasure of knowing personally. This guy was a former player at Johns Hopkins University, and now is one of the co-founders of the Squadz app. Got my man Nikhil Panu with us today. What's going on, man? How are you doing?
Good to see you, Drew. Appreciate you for having me.
Of course. I'm glad we could finally get it going. We've been talking about it for a while, so I'm excited to finally sit down and get the convo going. Let's jump right into it, man. So tell us, where did you grow up and how are you first introduced into sports?
So I'm from the Bay Area originally. So grew up in the East Bay, mostly born and raised in like Fremont. But kind of throughout my life in my childhood, I kind of made my way around. So I was in San Jose for a bit, in the peninsula, finally in the city. So pretty much I've made a lap around the Bay. So just general Bay Area guy. I made a brief hiatus and went to Johns Hopkins in Baltimore for school, but grew up around here. And I was first exposed to sports. I think, I was very fortunate. My parents, I think I have an older sister, and they really wanted to expose us to athletics, to sports from an early age. Obviously, I think, they wanted us to, school was a priority and everything like that, but they really wanted us to try different sports, see what we loved, and kind of go down that path. And so growing up, I was always around my sister whenever she'd be at practices for soccer or for tennis or for basketball even. And so I'd always be kind of tagging along, and I would try different sports. I tried everything, but I would always find myself kind of gravitating towards, like, if my sister was at tennis practice, I would try to go find, like, if there was a basketball court around the corner or something, like, I always found myself kind of gravitating that way. But no, that's kind of watching my older sister, my parents kind of putting that initial sort of interest in our heads too. And just getting that early exposure. That's kind of how I got started. And then as I was sort of around the basketball scene more, I think I remember one time just, my sister had tennis practice. I was on the basketball court, and there was a guy there who I guess was like a local coach for NJB, for like the national junior basketball. And he's like, "Hey, you're really tall. Like, you should play basketball." And I guess at the time I was very tall for my age.
Yeah.
I was also pretty chunky. I was a chubby boy too. So the coach was just like, "This is my future big man." So that's kind of how I got started. But yeah, that initial sort of exposure was through that.
Nice. And then was it only basketball you played growing up, or did you dive into like other sports too?
I played like everything when I was younger. As I mentioned, tennis. Like, I think my family's definitely a big tennis family. My parents played a little bit growing up too. So even watching my sister, who ended up playing at Pepperdine University, she was always like a really good tennis player. So like I would always kind of be along, and every now and then I would practice with her and stuff. So like tennis has been a big part of our lives. But for me, like, I used to play soccer for a little bit. I was, I always flex on people. I was in like third grade. I was all county goalie. But never saw the field after that. But like I dabbled with it. I played a little bit of football too growing up. But then basketball for me was like always like where most of my passion was. Actually, for a minute, I thought I was gonna be a football player, but my parents shut that down right away. So, but no, I played all kinds of sports though, but then fell in love with basketball.
Yeah, no, it's funny, man. I grew up playing a bunch of sports too, and same thing. There was a point where I was like, "Oh, football might be my thing," and then I got like my first time like getting like tackled really hard. I was like, "Oh no, this ain't it. This is not it."
Yeah, I had a pretty bad ankle injury playing football, and then that's when had that conversation in the mirror. I'm like, probably should stop. Probably should stop.
But you did stick with ball. You obviously got good enough to play at Johns Hopkins. What was the decision and kind of process of choosing there? And and then you ended up going there.
So I think, all of us, especially, any athlete growing up, everyone wants, everyone's got, league dreams. Everyone wants to be league bound. And I remember growing up, my dream was to like, play Stanford basketball and then like go to the league afterwards. I think everyone always has those aspirations. I think as I made my way through high school, I realized like, I'm not going to make it to the NBA. That's just how the reality of the situation. But I knew I was good enough to play at some level. And that's when I learned more about like the Division III level. And also for me, because knowing I'm not going to be, an NBA athlete, I wanted to go to a place like a higher academic school. I wanted to set myself up professionally too, knowing that, at some point, basketball may not be in my future, like professionally, but I knew I wanted to play at the next level. So learned about the Division III level, and towards the end of high school, I actually attended a number of, they host these, there's a couple organizations, but Hoop Mountain, Hoop Group, and then a lot of the Ivy League schools too. They all host like these all academic like basketball camps in the summer. So I remember that summertime between my junior and senior years, I was going there and playing at every possible camp that I could. Because again, going into it too, I knew I wanted to do engineering. I wanted to do computer science, and I wanted to play basketball. So I made a list myself of like, here are all the best engineering schools that I can apply to. And here of that list, like here are the schools I can play basketball at. A lot of them were, Division III schools. A lot of them were in the SCIAC in Southern California. A lot were out East. So, my parents had to come to terms with the fact that I was probably going to end up on the East Coast, and I was cool with it too. But a lot of them were out East. The Ivies were included in that as well. So I knew kind of where I was looking. And so these camps were like the best place to get in front of those coaches. So I went on a little road show that summer, played in a bunch of those camps. You get there and there's like hundreds of kids, same height, same build. They slap a number on you and it's like, go play. And definitely pretty intimidating. But, I was fortunate. I think there were a few camps where I did play pretty well. Sometimes you get lucky by being put on a team there with like a few other guys who, if you gel and you play really well together, then everybody wins and like everyone looks great, right? Oftentimes you go to these camps and like, everyone's trying to show out. Everyone's trying to, hog the ball a little bit and show out for the coaches. But I think I was put in I had a few fortunate situations where I had teammates who were like, everyone was moving the ball and like everyone was looking good and we were winning games. And I think that attracted a lot of the coaches there. And again, fortunate for me, the exact coaches that I was looking at on that sort of like all those engineering schools I was looking at, great programs, a lot of whom had really good, Division III and Ivy League basketball programs too. A lot of them actually, like after those camps, had contacted me, contacted my parents, mentioned that they were interested, and so it was a really good situation. So I had a few options to pick from, and the other thing that came about, and Johns Hopkins was one of them. I think for me, like I was picking between a few schools, narrowed it down. I think what I really loved about Hopkins was the fact that it was in a city. Like I love the fact that it was in Baltimore. It's a college town. It's, very close to DC. And once you're in the East Coast, like you hop on those trains, you can get anywhere you want to. It's very easy. So I thought that was really cool. I thought the fact that, it's a really good engineering program, but it's not just an engineering school. It had like a really diverse population of students, people from different backgrounds, different majors. You have a lot of, it's known for its like medical school and a lot of people working in the health space, but it also had a lot of people, econ majors and arts and English. And so it was really cool just to be around all those types of people. So that was another part for me. Third part was like, when I went there for my visit, it could not have gone better. I think like it was like 85 degrees, like the grass was super green. Everything was looking perfect.
You went during the spring or summer, right? You weren't there.
100%. I went there in the spring. So everything looked, perfect. So I didn't see like the winter time or anything like that. And then I think for me too, what was really important is like in high school, I was really, really close with my teammates, and there's like some of my best friends right now. And when I went to visit the Hopkins team and I met, like I was staying with a bunch of the players, they were just a group of guys that I like, we got along instantly. I felt really comfortable around them. They all had like, even we got to scrimmage a little bit too. And I love their playing style. They played good basketball. So for me, I felt super comfortable immediately. And then the cherry on top was I was actually invited to get my bachelor's and master's in computer science there in 4 years. Nice. So there was like an accelerated program. So I think the combination of all those things, comparing that to some of the other schools, obviously a lot of other great options too, but then like that for me kind of sealed the deal. And I just felt really comfortable there too.
Yeah, there's so many gems in that, dude. I think, well, one, for people that don't know, all those camps you mentioned are East Coast camps, right? Like Hoop Mountain, Hoop Group, right? So you have to fly across the country to go play in that. So that in itself is a level of like dedication and like I'm putting myself out there. And but I think it's so big for the kids that do go to those camps. They do go in there with that mentality of I need to drop 40 or I need to dunk on somebody. And a lot of times it does come down to who are the kids you're playing with. You're number 487, you have 5'8", like who are the other guys on your team for that weekend or a couple of days? That could make a world of difference. And then picking schools, I think it ties into what you're saying of everyone thinks they can go to the league, right? Every single kid who picks up a basketball thinks they're going to get drafted one day. So I think that same thought process goes into when they're looking for schools. All they hear about are like, we're all like phenomenal, great players, but they hear about like the Amani Bates or like these like lottery picks who choose a school for basically like nothing that you just mentioned, which is like, it's two different paths, right? Like I'm going to go to Michigan State or Eastern Michigan or Arizona State purely just for the basketball, and I might just be here for a year or two. But for the rest of us, it's like, all right, I'm going to be here for 4 years. So what are my teammates like? What's the campus like? What are the coaches like? Do I like my teammates? What's their playing style like? So I think it's interesting and funny sometimes when I'm talking to kids about playing in college, they don't think about any of that stuff. They're just like, where can I go score points? Am I going to be the popular guy on campus? That's like 1% of your college experience.
100%. I think that you hit that on the head as well too. And yeah, it's like if you are the Amani Bates of the world, amazing, good for you. And like that's a very different path. But
yeah.
I think for a lot of players out there, a lot of young kids coming up, like you can be really good at basketball, but it's really, really hard to be that like 1%, right? And so it's, you know, it's a tough conversation with yourself sometimes. You have to kind of, you know, face reality. And then like, who knows, like even after those 4 years of college or whatever, other opportunities may present themselves. And I had a number of teammates, and even I was exploring options to play overseas, like for a year or something too. So like there are other doors besides just like D1 to the pros or to the NBA. Like you can still go down like different paths. Like everyone has their own story and own path, and you just have to find the right one for you. So
yeah, and I completely agree too. I think once you start playing basketball more serious, taking more seriously, and start doing AAU and stuff, you realize like the scale and like how large the pool of like good players are. And there are some guys that don't even go to like JUCO or like NIA or anything that are phenomenal players, right? It's such a small percentage, and guys don't even realize that it's still like 1% of all high school players play Division III, right? It's still such a small percentage. So yeah, that was amazing. So you're there, you make it there. What was the overall experience like hooping there? And then what was some of your like favorite experiences being on the team?
A lot of them. I really loved, I mean, every part of it was amazing. I think a couple like key highlights for me. So I had mentioned early on when I was a kid and like first starting to play basketball, I was always the tallest person in the room and like tallest person on the court. And I was like very, you know, very slow, wasn't very athletic, nothing. And so I was always like playing center. And then progressively, as I made my way to like, you know, AAU, high school ball, whatever, like, you know, slowly crept my way to power forward. And then actually in high school, my last 2 years, I transitioned to more of like, even my high school coach was telling me, hey, like, if you want to play at the next level, you're probably going to be a wing. Right. And so like, you should start working on, you know, your guard skills and things like that. So it transitioned to more of like a small forward, a wing, and came into Hopkins, recruited as to play the three, basically. And I get there with my the two other incoming freshmen. We're all recruited to play the three. We're all like small forwards that they bring in. I'm about like 6'3", 6'4", whatever. The two other guys there, like one dude's like 6'7", one dude's 6'9". And I'm like, you know, what's going to happen here? We had a few injuries and like a few things kind of shake out. So, you know, as in any situation, when you're coming into a team, you have to earn your spot. You have to, you know, find your role within the ecosystem. That way, if you want to play, you gotta find the role that best suits you. We had a ton of wings. And so a couple things happened. We had a few injuries in the point guard position, and we had a few injuries to like the center position. And so the opportunity for me opened up to, hey, we need a point guard. And I had never played point guard in my life, but we had 2 point guards go down and I all of a sudden had to step in and play. So that was really interesting. And it honestly made me a much better player. Like I learned on the job, on the fly, like thrown into the fire, but it was terrifying initially too. I'd never like had to deal with it, nothing, but learned a lot, and it made me a much better player. And then those 2 other recruits that came in with me ended up playing like more of a 4-5 role. Like they were just like stretch bigs. And that actually ended up working out really well for like all of us, because we kind of found our role. And like for the next 4 years, our team was super successful actually. I think even my freshman year, we made the NCAA tournament. I think we had 3 tournament appearances over the course of my career there. And then we made it as far as the Sweet 16 or the Elite 8, I believe, in one of my years there. So like we had a really, really good team, nationally ranked a couple times, a couple All-Americans that I got to play with as well too. And I think one of the coolest moments was when we were playing in that Elite 8 game. We had traveled to Massachusetts. We were playing like the top seed in the region there. And they had a guy who was considered like the National Player of the Year candidate kind of. And we were up on them. We were up on them throughout. But I just remember like before the game itself, like we came onto the court, and this like every gym at the Division III level is so different. Some of them are like massive field houses because they're in these rural towns that like there's no pro sports there. So all the local like people in the town, they go to their Division III schools to watch like sports. Yeah. And so some of them have these really nice stadiums. Some have like really, really tight spaces. And I just remember at this one arena, it was at Babson actually. It was a really nice facility, but it was built like they had the stands kind of surrounding the court. And then they had like an upper level where people were watching from above. Yeah. And this was a really big game. It was the NCAA tournament. Their entire like school was there basically. And I just remember them playing in the warm-ups, like, you know, all these songs, and we came out first and we were just like, you know, shooting, doing our thing. When their team came out and just hearing that crowd erupt, like I cannot like recreate that feeling ever. It was like just the adrenaline rush and everything. And then that just kind of leading into the game. There's no feeling like it. We ended up losing that game. We were up on them, and the Player of the Year ended up just, you know, going off at the last like 2 minutes. But just the experience of that was awesome. I think just all the team travel and the events. We actually, my freshman year, we got to come out to California and play some of the SCIAC schools. So even my parents got to come watch, which is really cool as well. So, I mean, countless experiences, but those are just a couple though.
Yeah, I think it's always, you do remember the games, right? Everyone, okay, like tell me your favorite game. Cool. It is the bus rides, like the little moments, like you were saying, like the moment before the game. It's not even the game itself, right? It's like that feeling of adrenaline hitting you. It's like, oh, like I'm never gonna forget that, right? Cool, like someone caught a poster dunk or something, but like, yeah, that 2 minutes of just like the adrenaline rush, or seeing your parents in the stands with stuff you're gonna like take forever.
I guess actually totally right. It's like the pregame stuff, the traveling, the practices, the preseason pickup is always the best too. Yeah. The one other thing too that I have to mention is like my senior night comes around, and I mentioned I was really close with my high school team. Yeah. I think about 8 or 9 of them flew out to Baltimore to watch my senior night. Yeah. And I just remember them like they were all in the stands, like front row, going crazy. And just like going into that game, I'm like, all right, I gotta show out for these guys. Like they came all the way out here to watch me. And on the very first possession defensively, I go up to like, you know, to try to block a shot. I land on someone's foot and I roll my ankle. Oh. And it was really, really bad. I just knew it in the moment, but the adrenaline was going. And I'm like, you know, this is gonna tense up really quick. I have to like, let's go. I have this like first half to do something. And I immediately hit like 4 threes in a row. I go down. I just pull up. I'm like, I'm going to go out swinging. Yeah. And then come halftime, my ankle just turns into a football. And I was done for the rest of the game. But that was just like another fun one too. But
oh man. Yeah, you got to show out when your boys come, right?
Exactly. When your
boys come. So as mentioned earlier, you're one of the founders of Squadz, which I'm familiar with and I think is amazing. But let's talk about a little bit that. So when did you first get the idea to start that? Was it during school? Was it after? And when did you officially kind of launch it?
So I think the idea was always kind of within me. I think like, and you can relate to this. I'm sure a lot of the listeners can relate too. But growing up, the simplest question of just, yep, where can I go hoop today? Or, where can I go play soccer today? Or what tennis courts are available near me to like just go hit with my dad or hit with my coach? If you're like a coach or an organization looking for space, what gyms are available near me? Just like all these like questions. Some of them seem very simple, but it was incredibly hard to like figure out. And so like I faced that a lot growing up. I mentioned I played a lot of sports, but you had to go sign up for like local leagues. You had to sign up for like, you have to get a 24-hour fitness membership in order to get access to a space.
Yeah.
You'd have to go to your local playground and like, sometimes there's a bunch of people there, sometimes there's nobody there. So just the lack of sort of just information about like what's going on when, the lack of access to like good quality spaces. Those are things that we've all dealt with like all our lives, if you've played sports. And so those are like just, growing up, those are the problems I faced. When I was in school, I remember, I believe it was like between my sophomore and junior years, I came home for the summer and I was just looking to like, work out, find a gym to go. Like I wanted to go play pickup, just, stay in shape. I wanted to work on my game, do something. And just could not find anything reliable and I didn't know where to go. And
Right.
I ended up having to, renew my 24-hour fitness membership. And we all know how that stuff goes too. It's just chaotic in there and trying not to get hurt. And like, that's never very fun.
Yeah.
And so that's where I think also like that summer, I'm like, hey, like I always knew I wanted to be an entrepreneur. I didn't know what the idea would be. But I think also after like a couple of years, again, I was doing computer science, took a few like programming courses, and I was specifically about to take a course in like mobile apps and like, app development, things like that. And so I had a little bit of that under my belt at that point. And so I just remember on the plane ride back to Baltimore, sounds very cliche, but at that moment I was already like, okay, what could we do here? And I was like drawing up like wireframes in a napkin. And I'm like, okay, this is like what I want to do. And like going into that semester in that course that I met, the mobile apps course, like I made it sort of a class project where I was working on building this thing. And again, it started off as like more of a side project. And the premise was, if I'm a basketball player and I'm looking for places to play basketball, where is that happening? Like who's playing where and what facilities are open? And so that was like the initial stages of it. And then kind of through Hopkins, I was able to like, in some of the business classes I took, I would continue to work on it as like, okay, now I got like sort of a first like beta app to work with. Now let's come up with like a business plan. How do I take this to market? How do I do those things? So I leveraged a lot of my classes to work on like the early parts of Squadz.
Nice.
And then I also like, I ended up my senior year joining like Hopkins has like they had a growing like entrepreneurial ecosystem. And they had a few like accelerator programs and which was super helpful for me. But that like they provided some grant funding and they provided some like resources and advisors and people to kind of point you in the right direction. I remember my senior year, I'm like, hey, is this something that I can like pursue? Like, I would love to try this out. And so my senior year is where I'm like, okay, let's test this in Baltimore. Let's see what we can do. I did a few tests on campus. They went horribly. They didn't go very well. The app would always crash, whatever. But I also would like, at the time they had this app called Turo where you could kind of rent some peer-to-peer car sharing because I couldn't legally go rent a car yet. So I hopped on Turo. The cheapest option was this smart car, this like really, really tiny smart car. And I'm just cruising through the streets of Baltimore, like hopping rec center to rec center, just like talking with the rec professionals, learning about like what their needs are, how do we get more people utilizing their spaces? What are their pain points? And so I use like my time at Hopkins to really learn about the problem. And also like from a product standpoint, what are the things that people are looking for? And so by the time I was done with school, I learned like the problem isn't necessarily connecting people to people. It's connecting people to like the space is actually the crux of it all, right? Like where can people come together to play? So facilities became a big component. And then there was like a lot of these programs and activities already exist, whether it's like sports leagues or open gym programs, drop-ins, those exist too. So how can we leverage existing facilities, existing activities, and bring the players into that ecosystem and connect basically all three?
Yeah.
And so that's where, like, coming out of school, again, with some of the grant funding and additional funding too, I was able to kind of pursue this full time. And that's kind of where, Squadz initially kicked off. Came back to the Bay Area here, and I wanted to see what this would look like in a city market. And again, it was very slow grind trying to, I think people were really interested in the concept and the idea, but just getting them to use an app, to download an app, like, it takes time for those things.
Yeah.
But we eventually were able to bring in a lot of new partners. We worked with a lot of local parks and rec. We would work with a lot of like private facilities. We were able to get a decent, population of players in the Bay Area. I would literally daily go to a new like playground. I would go to a new 24-hour fitness. I would go to like local rec centers, and I would just be like hooping with guys for a little bit and then handing out cards, be like, hey, download this, download this. So like really, really hustling. And eventually we built a pretty solid player community, and we had actually we got a lot of interest in Los Angeles. And so like we were thinking about how can we start to build this there. And that's when like COVID hit. And so for us, like it was obviously, sports and pandemics don't go hand in hand. So we had to kind of put things on mothballs. But it gave me some time to really think about, okay, like there were a lot of learnings here. Like, how do we make this, like, how do we get traction much faster? How do we like, fine tune this thing? And so we've basically relaunched like post-COVID. It's been about 1.5 years right now. And things like as soon as we came out of COVID, I think there were a few things. One, people were itching to get back out there and play. And we really simplified things from a product perspective and really focused on, let's go build these like communities in different cities and get as many players as we can just in the gym, on the field, on the court. And so that's been our focus right now. And so that's been like, we've been able to really, really pick up some good traction and a lot of cool things coming down the pipeline. But sorry, long story short, but that's kind of how like the flow has gone. But ultimately our vision here is, the same way you like, if you're looking for restaurants to book, you go to Open Table and you can book that reservation.
Yeah.
If you're looking for a place to stay this weekend, you can go to Airbnb and book that. Even if you're looking for like a yoga class or like a Pilates class and you're just, trying to see what studios are available and book your spot, we want to bring that same experience to sports. And we want to be able to streamline access to recreational sports, organized sports, and facilities. And so we're building basically a platform that facilitates that. And that's kind of, what Squadz is.
Yeah. No, I think it's amazing. I also love that you were honest that like at first it didn't go well, right? It's like started out at first, wasn't amazing. We just kept pushing through. And then I'm just laughing too, thinking back when I was like younger, whether it's teenagers or 20s, you would like get in a car with your boys and literally drive around to like find a park to play at, or like, where's the best pickup, or where is anything else. So I think it's amazing on so many levels of just laughing, like, yeah, it'd be great if I just had an app, or like, okay, go to this park. We don't have to waste 30 minutes texting or driving around. We can just know where it's at. And then even now, I think for me too, being a little older, getting a little older, still trying to play, I'm not necessarily hanging around like hoopers a lot. So, okay, cool. I know there's a morning pickup run, or I know there's a weekend pickup run. So I think it is amazing. I never thought about that, but it is just kind of like an Open Table or something, like where should we eat dinner, or where should we find some food? So no, man, you guys are doing great. And I know COVID messed up everyone's life, but I think you put it perfectly. Sports and COVID definitely did not go hand in hand. There were some industries where they survived, and you can still see they still are hybrid or work from home. Basketball, soccer, you need to be face-to-face, in person, on the field, on the court. There's really no substitute for it.
You can't do that virtually. Like you can do, I mean, with coaches and trainers, as I'm sure you did as well. But like, I know there's elements of virtual training and things like that. But when it comes to bringing people together to actually play sports and like, play 5-on-5, play, indoor soccer or whatever, like you need to be in person. And so, and what was really cool, and sure, the pandemic at the time, it didn't match up, but what's clear is like, pandemic aside, coming out of this, like sports isn't going anywhere. Like it's not an industry that's like, people want to play. It's a fun way to get a workout in. It's a fun way to meet people. It's, even for me right now, like after, like during COVID, I would be on a stationary bike getting my like workout in, but it's not the same as like Now every day I could potentially go play basketball, and that's so much more fun for me too. And I get a great workout. So it's something that like obviously it put a pause on things, but coming out of it, it showed me just like how much demand there is and like how big of a problem this is that we're solving. And again, this like basketball is definitely our biggest sport, but this is across all sports and for all athletes and all sort of providers and things like that.
That's awesome, man. I think we're kind of seeing just the world in general, AI is becoming more of part of people's lives. And I think everyone's worried about them taking jobs. But I do think with sports we're talking about, it is becoming more analytical. You are seeing more positions within professional teams. It's more data driven. And obviously your company and other companies are popping up where it is more tech and sports intertwining. What do you kind of see the relationship of like tech and sports moving forward? And do you ever think there'll be a point where like we're losing jobs to tech within sports?
So I think the first part of that in terms of like technology and sports, it's an industry that's growing really quickly. It's like a lot of sports in general has been very low tech for like a very long time. Like there actually is a lot of technology that's being used, but it's very, very archaic, very old school. And I also think when you think about sports technology, I deal with this like day to day too, but when people think about sports technology these days, a lot of it is, you know, if you think about like investors and like when they're looking at sports tech, they're looking at like professional sports and media, right? Like media rights, like companies that get a lot of like, you know, viewership, like you think about the overtimes of the world, right? That's like one bucket of companies. Then you have companies that are optimizing like fan experiences and arena experiences. Again, that's mostly under pro sports. Then there's like sports betting. And again, there's a bunch of different categories like that. But it's so funny how at the end of the day, it all like the market that sort of drives a lot of those ecosystems is like that pool of people who love sports, that loves to play sports. Sure, they love to consume sports too on television, but like a lot of those people love to play, and there's very little in term that's like addressing them. And that's like that for us, when we think about sports tech, it's not that we're trying to replace anything with like we're trying to embed technology, obviously, but the technology in our situation is more so to open up access, right? And to make things easier. It's not in our situation, it wouldn't be to like replace jobs or replace people or whatever. I think, sure, if you think about the broader sports tech ecosystem, yeah, with things like AI and whatever, and like I've heard about a lot of different products that exist. Like I think for the most part, a lot of these technologies are only there to enhance the experience. I don't think there's, again, like we talked about, there's no way to like have sports like be purely virtual. I think there is that in-person like component. There's like some level of like somebody needs to spearhead something, whether it is an open gym, whether it is a league, whether it is like watching sports. There's always going to be people behind that experience. So the question you had about like replacing people, I wouldn't be super worried about that. Like we still need coaches, right? We still need trainers. We still need players. We still need providers, and we still need facilities, and we need the people that make those things go. So I think those are all in like very good standing. But, and then just kind of, if you look at those different buckets of what like sports tech is and like what the categories are, there are so many things that are getting a lot of publicity, but at the end, again, where I see a lot of opportunity in like, that's a market that's very untapped is that recreational sports market. Like sports leagues exist and, you know, fitness clubs and things exist, but there's not a lot of technology there that's like bringing it all together. And so that's, again, where we see the opportunity. But I do think going forward, a lot more people are entering this space. They're seeing that opportunity. I know a lot of like brands outside of sports are really, they love sports in general. I know a lot of people are looking at the sports ecosystem and they see a ton of opportunity. So I think we're going to get more and more just, you know, investment in the space. I think we're going to get a lot of like new cool ideas in the space on all aspects of sports, whether it's youth, adult, professional, whatever it is. But yeah, that's if that answers your question. That's
that's perfect. I agree with everything too. It's one of those industries that doesn't get talked about on the news when they are like, oh, AI is taking over jobs or anything. Like, oh, I think I work in an industry that like is safe from all that stuff.
Mhm.
But I do agree at the same time, though, I think there is going to be a lot more merging and like intertwining of tech and sports moving forward, but without the fear or threat of jobs or careers being taken away. So no, that was perfect. So Squadz is growing. I'm seeing it. But what are some of the next steps for you guys?
So as I kind of mentioned, I mean, a lot of stuff going on right now, all very positive, but right now we're proud to be in like 15 cities. So as I mentioned, one of our goals right now is building community. We kind of call them our hubs, our hub markets, our like Squadz hubs. And basically what we're trying to do is like, hey, in these like different cities that we're coming to, we're starting to build that community that's they love, like, whether it's like they love the Squadz experience or they love just like the idea of like, you know, pre-registering for sports, booking spots in like sports. It's kind of one, we're building these really like these communities of people who just love to play. And like the brand of Squadz resonates with them. But then on top of that, we're almost like getting them prepared for like what's to come in the future, where, you know, right now in like Atlanta, there's like multiple open gyms that we're hosting like weekly, but soon in like the next few months and hopefully later this year, it can go from like a few open gyms to join to now like hundreds, thousands of like activities, leagues, things to join. And so what we're doing is basically building these like smaller communities of like our early power users and early adopters that we're then going to start to like introduce more and more. And so we're really excited about that. So I think, yeah, we're in these 15 cities now, the Bay Area being our biggest city. We hope by the end of this year that we'll be in 25 plus in terms of these hubs. Nice. And then kind of coming forward is like, we're working a lot on the technology side and the platform side to enable some of those things I'm talking about. And so we're hoping by in very soon that we'll be rolling out some new products and a new app, a new ecosystem that'll be that'll make this whole like in terms of streamlining access to like local organized sports. This new app is going to be very, very like crucial for that too. So like that's going to be coming later this year as well. And we're trying to take that to a few of our cities and then kind of grow from there too. But yeah, that's kind of what's on the pipeline now. And introducing more sports, trying to, you know, basketball, like I mentioned, is our biggest one, but we do have like futsal, indoor soccer, volleyball, pickleball, a lot of these different things too. And so cool things coming too, for sure.
Yeah, I'm excited to see it. Pickleball is the fastest growing sport in the country right now, right? Is that correct?
That's factual. It's actually, yeah. It was already the fastest growing sport pre-pandemic. Okay. Pandemic just, you know, put gasoline on the fire, and it just continued to grow since then too. And now I think it used to be predominantly amongst like the senior community. Yeah. But now it's like, you know, young adults and people are all getting into it because, you know, it's like now it's become this fun social experience as well too. So the market for that's just booming for pickleball too.
Hell yeah. So what would be some advice you would give, maybe even like to yourself? You're going back, you're talking to you in high school or even before any of this. I guess two parts. Your journey intertwined, but what's advice you would give for someone who's looking to play college sports? And then what's advice you would give to someone who is maybe transitioning out of sports and trying to be an entrepreneur?
I mean, there's so many things I can look back on and adjust for sure. I think from an athletics standpoint, I think earlier on we kind of touched on this, but I think it's really important if you're just starting off like pre-high school and you're getting ready and stuff too. I think obviously like if you're really dedicated to a sport, like, you know, hone your craft, put in the time, put in the work. I think we all hear those things all the time. Yeah. Now, strategically, as you're getting like closer to the college level, and if you want to play at that next level, I think it's really, really important to do the work early in terms of where do you want to go? Where do you see yourself fitting in? Be realistic and pragmatic with yourself as well, and be like, hey, like, you know, it's great that I want to play at the Division I level. Great. If you have the ability to do so, what are my options that are realistic? And how do I get in front of those coaches? Right. Same thing is like, hey, maybe the Division I level isn't for me. I'm not quite there. but like I could see myself definitely playing at the Division 3 level or Division 2 or NAIA or something. Be realistic with yourself and plan accordingly, and then do whatever you can to get in front of the right people to make that happen, right? If you're somebody looking to play, at the Division 3 level, I highly suggest some of those camps that I mentioned, Hoop Mountain, Hoop Group, those Ivy League camps. And if that's the path you're trying to go in, like more of like a high academic path, AAU is great, but it may not be the right place to find those coaches, right? So whereas conversely, if you're looking at like Division 1 or JUCOs or some Division 2 schools, like they may be going to all those AAU circuits and stuff too. So it's just about like being realistic with yourself, knowing where you're going to be fitting in, and ultimately just putting yourself in the best position to succeed in the basketball front. That would be my biggest advice. And that's kind of what I ended up following. And I would suggest that to a lot of players. It's good to dream. That's what motivates people. But when it comes down to it, like you have to like set yourself up, and the college admissions process is a grind too. I don't envy anybody going through that, but you just need to set yourself up to be in the right position for that. So that's like on the basketball front. I think from an entrepreneurial standpoint, I mean, there's a million things I can go back and speak to, but that would be a whole separate podcast. So we can do that another time. But I think like the main things are, if you want to start, a business or like a tech startup, whatever, understand that it's a grind. It's not easy. It's not glitzy. It's not glamorous. Like you are going to have to roll up your sleeves and get very, very in there. As I mentioned, parts of like the early story is like going to every single park, going to every single playground, meeting with people. I still do that to this day. And so that's like one element is like be prepared for the grind, because it's not easy. Two, the other thing I would suggest is like, if you're going to pursue, like start a business or a startup, you need to be really, really passionate about it. Don't just do it to do it. Do it because you really are passionate about that mission. You understand the problem really well. And it's something that a lot of other people also feel. So I would definitely validate what you're trying to build as well, see the market need, and then go. And if you really are passionate about it and want to do it, if you're doing sort of a tech startup, find other people that are just as passionate as you are to bring in early as like your co-founders and things like that. Because going at it as like a solo founder is a very lonely journey, and it's a lot. So try to find some other people too, who are just as passionate as you are, who want to be just as invested as you are. And when you're starting out, and that have complementary skills to you as well. Like you can't have everybody do it. It's the same thing as, building a roster. You can't have 5 point guards on the floor. Like you need to have complementary positions. So like find people that complement you and build together is one other point. And then I guess I think I'll leave it at that. I can go on for hours about that too. But those would probably be my biggest piece of advice.
I love those, man. Those were awesome. That was perfect. With it being called Ball2Books, what are some book recommendations you got for us?
I have to say I've been slacking in the reading lately, but I some of the books that I have read, it's been some time, I won't date it, but a couple recommendations that I would say in the realm of sports and business, Shoe Dog, the story of Phil Knight. It's about the Nike founder and kind of his story, his early story and stuff too. Just for me personally, hearing about founders' journeys is super like, as a founder myself, it puts things in a lot of perspective, and you take away little tidbits along the way. And the fact that this is obviously in the sports realm too, it's very inspiring, and I've learned a lot from it too. It's a great read. So Shoe Dog, the story of Phil Knight, that's one recommendation I have. Another more, I guess not pure sports, but Toughness by Jay Billis is actually, it's my high school coach and mentor. He's a big fan of, he reads a lot, and he reads a lot of books in like the sports and like coaching field and stuff too. And so he actually would always gift me different books to read. And so Toughness by Jay Billis is one of them. It's an awesome book. And it's not just, obviously Jay Billis is like very prominent in the college basketball space, but it's not just about, mental toughness in the sports realm. And it kind of defines what toughness is, but it's not just like what you think. There's a lot of other factors that define toughness. And those things can be applied to sports. It can be applied to life. It can be applied to business. So I think that's another great book too.
Nice. I know the Phil Knight one, but I got to check out that Jay Billis one. It sounds good. Where can we find you? What's your social plug everything you got? Where can they check out Squadz? What's all that good stuff?
Absolutely. So I think the best place to check out Squadz is on Instagram. Follow us at Squadz. If you're in any, we also have a number of like local city accounts. So if you're in the San Francisco Bay Area, there's like Squadz SF, Portland, Squadz PDX. So like you can find your local city account. You can also follow the main one and see a bunch of like what we're doing in different markets and cities there. That's the best place for that. Me personally, I'm npanu32 or Squadz Nick on Instagram too. So feel free to follow me there as well. Our website, squadz.com. You can find more information about what we're building there. I think, yeah, those are some of the main things.
Nice. Awesome. And for everyone, it's Squad, SQUADZ, ends with the Z. Yes. Nikhil, bro, I appreciate you, man. This was awesome. You dropped a lot of stuff in there that I love. I think people are going to love hearing. For everyone else, this is Ball2Books Spotlight. See you guys next time. Peace.